have the privilege now of introducing our third panel, which is our SCD community members panel, where they're going to discuss their experiences with clinical trials and talk more about, what they hope to see in the future. So we have, to start out, Antoine Sarton, we had Jess Sims, and we have Andre Harris. The panel will be moderated by Adrian Shapiro.
I'm going to sit. So I'm Adrian Shapiro. I am a community member. I am, a grand dame of the community. I'm fifth generation of mothers in my family to have a child with sickle cell disease. And I am only alive because of clinical trials. I was always in a hurry, my mother said, arrived very early. And so clinical trials saved my life. And so we're here to talk about clinical trials in respect to sickle cell. And I have some of these wonderful, wonderful community members. Some I've known way too well. Andre. But, so let's talk about it. I want to hear your story. I only got into advocacy work because I was so excited about gene and cell therapy. That was it. That was the driver for me. It was going to cure my kid, solve my family problem. I didn't think about anybody else, literally, at the time. So that was my driver. And so what about you, Jess? Tell me your story.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Sims, and I have hemoglobin SS, and I have participated in 2 clinical trials. I've had 2 very different experiences with those, but I decided to do it because, well, number one, the trust that I had built with my hematologist, Dr. Ursula, who no longer practices anymore, but he was at Inova Hospital Systems and would bring clinical trials to us and, say that, I've had conversations with X, Y, and Z company, and it looks that these drugs are promising and you would be a great candidate for it. And so trusting him, trusting my institution and all of the healthcare workers that surround our institution, really signed up for it. And also the hope that, I can be a part of the change and the research. I think, research for sickle cell has taken far too long, as we all know in this room, and to be a part of that, to say that, 5 years, 10 years down the line, there are medicines and therapies that are widely available, really gave me hope, and that is why I participated in both of the clinical trials so far, and looking forward to gene therapy.
Okay, Andre?
Hello, everyone. I'm Andre Harris. I have SS as well, 36. I first started getting involved in clinical trials very early. I was going to Duke University Medical Center and their sickle cell clinic. I transitioned from peds to adult. And for many of those who are doctors would probably know Dr. Nirma Shah. And he was very big on clinical trials at the time. And I think he led the clinical trials at the clinic. And so anytime there was a trial that was available, I made myself available. I realized very early that we couldn't continue to complain about progress if we weren't willing to participate. Of course, I know that there are barriers for a lot of people in participation, but for me, for many of the trials that I were eligible for, it was a no-brainer to consent myself, sign up, and participate in the trial. So I can't tell you how many trials I've been in. I've lost count, but many of them have been, pill studies, trying to make sure that we address fatigue, or, none of them have been major, transformative, something that changed my life. But even those, smaller studies are even as important as, the gene therapies and the other, radical clinical trials that people talk about, I think, when we talk about this. And so also I've done several with NIH. And so I go every year to the NIH, and whatever they ask me to do, I just say yes. Like during the consent process, I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, and I think Dr. Campbell said that, you know, he likes to make people think about it. I don't care. Like, yeah, like let's do it. So I could go get me some lunch. Like I'm ready to go. So I make sure that I'm very emphatic that I love to participate. In whatever trial it is, I weigh my benefits and my options. And if I say yes, then I mean yes. So those are my experiences, and I love to talk about it because I think we need more awareness and education about clinical trials in our space.
Great. Antoine?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you to Sick Cell. My name is Antoine Sarton. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Fortunately, I am a parent and a caregiver. I have the trait, but I'm a father to 5, 2 of my own. I have an 18-year-old son, but I have my 12-year-old daughter who is sickle cell SS. And it's been a journey with us within these last few years. I've always knew about sickle cell growing up. My grandmother, I watched them take care of my uncle and my auntie, which are both deceased from it. Auntie died at 36, went into a crisis, had an aneurysm back in '08. My uncle passed at 55. He ended up moving to Atlanta because they had better treatments during that time back in '05, right after my auntie died. And he passed at 55 in 2019. So growing up, I knew all about sickle cell. It wasn't until it hit home for me with my 12-year-old daughter. I can go on all day long about what it's been like up and down as a parent. Usually you don't see too many fathers speaking on this, but it's been firsthand with me. Just recently, and I'm going to go back, it's just last year, I almost lost her. It was a tough road. I noticed a decline. She had been on hydroxyurea at the age of 4, and we was doing really good. She was only probably having 1 crisis out of a year, which was wonderful to us. Maybe a couple of ER visits. But it wasn't until maybe when she turned about 9 years old, I started seeing a decline. Ended up having crisis after crisis, and every time she would have a crisis, turns into an acute chest syndrome. We end up in the intensive care unit. Just this last year, where I said I almost lost her, we ended up in the ICU again. And this was due to her not only having sickle cell SS, but she also developed an autoimmune disorder called hemolytic anemia. So she's fighting against two, trying to produce healthy red blood cells. And every time she got blood transfusions, they was just eating away at the red blood cells. And we couldn't understand what was going on, why that was taking place, until her doctor, which is wonderful, been in her care since day one, Dr. Raj from Louisville, Kentucky as well, with the North Children's Hospital. He called us and told us that, and this was after we got stuck in Florida. We've been stuck down in Birmingham, Alabama Children's Hospital. It wasn't until he told us to come in and we had to admit her. And fortunately, he wanted to decrease the chances of those antibodies because she was producing so many antibodies to where, of course, you know, with the any type of steroids for sickle cell, it throws them into a crisis. And it threw her into a crisis, which she ended up developing acute chest syndrome again. We was back in the ICU. And it wasn't until her doctor reached out to some other colleague doctors around. And what I love about my doctor is, or her doctor, is that he's been doing it for almost 40-some years, but he's not the one to just say, oh, this is what it is, this is what we have to do. He likes to collect data. And I know one of the doctors mentioned she's a research. She likes to do research and collect data. He's big on data, and he also likes to collaborate with his colleagues. And so, fast forward, it was a doctor up in Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Dr. Kalfa, who suggested to him the medicine called Solaris. Solaris is what saved my daughter's life. Literally, in 3 days, we saw a total big change. He pulled me to the side and he asked me, what does the future look like? Are you open to trials of a gene therapy? And I said, well, I'm willing to do whatever it's going to take long term for my daughter. And so he's the one that brought gene therapy to us and suggested that we take a look into it and, try to go through the trial. So we went up to Cincinnati Children's Hospital because that's the closest place for us, because I had to take in consideration. I could have went to Atlanta. I could have went to Boston. Could have went to Chicago. Could have even came up here in D.C. But considering the support that I need to go through this process, we chose to go to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which is a really good hospital. Dr. Grimley is the transplant doctor from up there, and Dr. Kalfa is the hematology doctor who we decided to go with. And so we have not started the trial yet, all because during that process, she ended up developing AVN, avascular neurosis.
Right.
And so we had to get a whole total hip replacement just this past July. And so her doctors mentioned to us, and again, this is what I really applaud about, these doctors. She wasn't so quick to tell us, oh, we need to go ahead and let's get started on this gene therapy. Because her numbers were looking so good with her being on the hydroxyurea, she's producing fetal cells. They wanted to reevaluate this in 6 months to see where she stands then. And so that's where we at right now. We haven't ruled it out yet, but we are in the process of getting ready to start the gene therapy at some point.
So this is really interesting. So my point of thinking about a clinical trial was when my daughter had no options, right? And then here we have Andre, who is clearly an early adapter, right? Getting in, understanding it, getting it from a youthful age, right? And then you, right? More conservative. And then I hear another parent who's like having my dream in the sense that gene therapy, but there's something that's could be working instead of that. So of these treatments, of your experience, what really was it like for you to sign those papers and say, yes, I'm turning my body over? Was it something, you're a person of faith, Andre. What was it like for you as you were really young?
So again, like I alluded to earlier, I think for me, so I will say younger, there were conversations about some more radical clinical trials where, they walked us through, what could happen. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. But the conversation really was dependent on, as Antoine said, I've been on hydroxyurea for over 20 years. And it's worked for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but it's worked very well for me. So first of all, many times when they do approach me for participation, I don't even meet the criteria because I'm not sick enough, or I don't have enough vaso-occlusive crisis to even qualify to be in the trial. So that was one. But then, there was some where they wanted, I guess you could say, more healthy volunteers who have sickle cell. And I was like, I think the benefits were outweighed by the risk for me because I was just better along in my disease. But that being said, when I did consent in other studies, to me, it just felt like you told me what it would do. You told me what, the risk, and, I didn't really have a thought about it. It just, let's do it. Like, I want to do what I can to make sure that I do my part in research, however it may be. Because like I said before, I just felt so frustrated by how I had friends, even like in the clinical setting where it seems like they just had so many more options. And I'm like, well, why do they get that and I don't? Like, what's the disconnect here? And, of course, this conversation isn't just my participation, but I feel like it's almost like voting to me. Like, I can't complain about my political prospects if I don't vote. I'm talking personally, right? So I don't complain about what happens if I didn't play a part in voting. I feel the same about clinical trials to an extent that if I didn't do my part, then how am I complaining about the actual landscape? Personally, I'm not condemning anyone about their political thoughts. That's how I feel, because we in DC. I don't want nobody.
DC.
Okay.
And we're grateful.
These are my own personal views. They're not connected to Sick Cells or the sickle cell community at large.
Thank you. Okay, Jess.
Yeah, I'd say my experience is the same. Really, your disease sickle cell shows up in many different ways, and having many challenges with it, just thinking about, okay, if I'm out of options here, and just realizing how long hydroxyurea has been around, and that's the only FDA approved medication for sickle cell, it was just, impressed upon me to be a part of the process, right? And to see where new therapies, new drugs can take us. Also, back to that trust factor, it's so important to have providers and a health system that you trust. Dr. Allen's in the building. I think she's on the next panel here, but she's just a thorough experience altogether. Her being the principal investigator, then for the clinical coordinator of the clinical trials, just always being those lines of communication continue to be open, making sure that I'm updated, making sure that I know when my appointments are, what's going to happen at the appointment. So just having that clear line of communication during the process was just very helpful to continue on with it.
So I hear you talking about what we have found. People will always say, what's the roadblock? What's the roadblock? Many times it is that you have a provider who isn't following the research or is not of that mindset, or more the mindset, well, you're still here, so we're doing good, right? In my case with my daughter, her doctor was so thrilled. He just wanted to sign her up for everything, but she was too sick to be signed up for everything. And so we didn't have any choices. And now she's aged out and I don't get to make the choice. So the thing that I fought so hard for and dreamed for is here, but I don't get to choose. So, and I'm hoping that all of the things that we're seeing as far as consent and all the new changes and everything are going to be more helpful in helping her determine how she has lived X amount of time with her, as she called them, sickle cells. And she knows what that's like and what that risk is. So
I just want to touch on that a little bit from a parent's perspective. At the age of a 12-year-old, that's what's been really heavy on us right now, because I have a 12-year-old daughter who is just coming into her identity. She's in the 7th grade, and the thought of going through a trial of some type of drug that ain't guaranteed, trying to get her to understand the longevity of this has been very challenging here lately. And it wasn't just until maybe about a month ago when she had a mild pain crisis and she broke down on me and she says, Dad, I'm just tired of feeling like this. I'm ready to do it. But leading up to that moment, when they told us, when we had our consultation about the gene therapy and we was going with the Casgavy, they mentioned chemo. And the first thing went to her head was losing her hair. She was against it. She told the doctors, no, we ain't doing it. And I'm just like, we ain't even committed to anything. I ain't signed no papers. We was just a conversation that we was having. And she was against the fact of going through chemo to get this treated. And so that was just back in March. And, I've been having conversations with her over and over about, the longevity of this. Your hair can grow back, but those are challenges that I have been faced with. And I'm sure others, parents with the kids that's, underage or not able to make their own decision, like, young adults. But that has been a very challenging journey right now for us.
So if you were to have a conversation with someone about just I'm going to say the practicality of being, and we talk a lot about disruption and location, but the practicality for you being part of a clinical trial. In a practical sense, what would be the most practical clinical trial environment for you? Anybody, just take it.
Oh, Jessica.
We're going to give them a little bit of our gray matter here. What would be that? Yeah.
I'll go from a parent's perspective and a caregiver. Get as much information as you can and ask all the questions that you can possibly think of, even if it's the same question, until you get a clear understanding about what this trial will look like. And what I like about Casgavy is they even got pamphlets that literally take you from stage 1 all the way through the entire process. And I think that was just very key for me in being able to explain that not only to my daughter, but to my family members as well, what that looks like, because this is not just going to be an overnight or, we spend weeks in the hospital. This is a year journey of a drug treatment that we're going to have ups and downs, and it's like a roller coaster. But what I loved about the fact of it was just so informative, and it had it really answered all my questions. At this point, it's just pretty much going through it now and actually experiencing it and living through it day to day and what that's like. But really just educate yourself and get all the information as you can about these trials.
You?
And I'd say practically, it's a little bit of a sacrifice, right? Like it's not, something overnight, even when you're just on the drug trials and not even something as big as gene therapy, but it takes some time, I had to rearrange my work schedule, figure out days that I could be in the hospital all day for the pre-evaluation, the evaluation days, the middle of the trial to see how things was going, the end of the trial, so that takes time, for you to rearrange your life, your schedule, to figure out, when to do it. It takes discipline to take your meds every day, something that you probably haven't been taking before. One of the companies who's here today infused technology, so that made it much easier. But in my first clinical trial, it was more so of like a written diary. So, that's even time that you have to take out and do. But the practicality of it takes time. It's going to take some rearranging for you to commit to it. And you may not feel all the time. I think we also battle the disease as well. So there could be a day where you're supposed to be in for evaluation, but you're like, I just don't feel well. And you kind of have to push through because, there are certain days that you have to be in clinic to have those type of evaluations. But realizing that once you go through it, you can see like how you did on the clinical trial, how it made a difference for you as the patient. And it's pretty exciting when, Fulcrum pulls up the studies and I'm like, I think I'm patient 7 or 8. So that's also a good feeling too. And to know that help is coming. I think for so long in sickle cell, we were told crazy things like you won't live past a certain age. But then when you're a part of something, you're like, oh no, help is on the way.
Yeah.
So for me, I really am not trying to minimize this when I respond. So I don't hope that's how it comes off. But for me, I just understand that my advocacy, regardless if it's participating in clinical trials or not, is I want to do all I can so that the generation behind me doesn't suffer like I did. And whatever or however I do that, that's what I've committed to do. And so, I already get stuck a lot. So if I get another blood draw because I'm on a trial, whoop-de-doo. So like, that's just how I feel. Like, it's nothing, and just like, most of the trials that we've talked about, they really were just something I felt like I may not benefit from what I participated in. I don't know. Like we don't know. Like we could all not be here tomorrow, but I know that what I'm doing can help the generation coming after me. And I don't want to sound morbid or anything like that, but I want to be able to take advantage of the position that I'm in now. So that when hopefully I become a golden warrior and I'm like a 90-year-old man with sickle cell, I could be like, I helped those little kids, I want to be like that. So that's, yeah, right. With my gray locks. That's just how I feel. And so, that's how I approach it. That's a practical, to answer the question, I feel, and I looked at the last Therapeutics Conference I was at, and I'm going to give the same answer, but a practical environment is environment that has a wraparound social care. This community does not have the resources that other communities have. Like, not going to do a history lesson, but we know that, right? So we can't expect to have a trial that's designed that's not going to be supportive. And then when they can't meet those clinical endpoints, you're mad that they're, non-compliant or non-adherent or whatever word you want to label them. But you have to be supportive from a social perspective. Transportation, like the fact that I'm still in advisory boards for pharma companies and say, well, are you providing transportation? And like, we didn't think of that. Why didn't you? Like, why is that a novel concept? Or like, what about housing or what about food? Like, people are still not thinking about this in 2025. This is a huge determinant of how they're able to participate. So in a practical environment, that should be the first thing you're talking about.
So you're thought about. And I was thinking as you were talking now, my first real experience with gene and cell therapy trial was 10 years ago when I looked at the person had done the trial on. I was like, well, why did you pick this person, right? What support do you have? And I want to say, one of our themes is innovation and change. And I really think that sickle has changed the landscape on clinical trials. If you look at it now, pharma companies are now thinking, just like what you said, thinking about all the things that we actually need to succeed, right? There were many times when I was doing my research on clinical trials, it would see the patients were non-compliant. And then I'd look and I'd go, well, shoots, if my baby was hurting and they were on a clinical trial and they were still hurting and I'm giving them whatever the trial thing is, I'm going to go and give my baby what they need. So these practical things, it is the practical things that for so long science was not a part of. And I think with innovation, right, and this coming a personalized medicine, and also the high cost of research, if you're going to spend so much money to bring it to market, you want to make sure you put everything in place to get those participants, right, to enable them to go from start to finish successfully. All right, so I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to give your best piece of advice to anyone thinking about a clinical trial. Go.
I guess for me would be, and I think I was just fortunate, but I would pass it along. Wherever you decide to do your trial run, reach out and see if they got case managers that's available for your resource that will actually help you go through the process of getting approved. For an example, for me, we're on Medicaid in the state of Kentucky, and they sent us the ringers that I had to do by myself. I mean, through the ringers. I mean, they had her do every blood test that you think of for a 12-year-old child. And then I had to have a conversation about her being pregnant at 12 years old. So, thanks for the case manager. Helped us through that whole process to get approved, which we did get approved, but for the first 6 months.
Case manager, go. You only have 15 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, you have 12 and a half.
I think that I would say, I think I would say the biggest thing that you should do is make sure you have that support system, like outside of the hospital, like, or the trial, like whoever it may be, your family, your friends. So
Thank you. She gets 12 honorary seconds.
No, it's okay. Go. I would say stay inspired and stay encouraged through the process, whether it's a small study or a large one. Just keep that hope and faith that things can be different, and they can be different. You know, it's not some flyaway moonshot, but it's here and it can happen. You know,
That's right.
in the near future. So stay inspired.
And I want to say I'm representing 5 generations, and 4 of those generations had nothing other than bubble wrapping their babies and burying them. And I'm proud to say that with the work we're all doing together, all of us, I'm really going to be the last generation in my family. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What an inspiring and empowering panel. I just want to thank each one of you for sharing your stories and for being vulnerable and welcoming enough to make sure that you guys are doing what you need to do, and so that the folks either in the room or online can also do what they need to do.